We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis in Meseches Nazir. This is Nazir Daf 56b. The Braisa continues, Maya mechiluto ton teglachas, just like the days when a mitzorah is a confirmed mitzorah, so shaving is required. Af yemei safaro, the same is true in the days when he is counting. Again, as we said, when a mitzorah is going through the purification process, there's two shavings. There's one, the first shaving, and then there's a counting of 7 days and a second shaving, and therefore we can learn out as follows. Umaya mechiluto, just like the days when he's a confirmed mitzorah, ein olin lo min Minyan, those days do not count towards the number of days of his Nazirus. Af yemei svaro, so too it's true in the days of the counting of a mitzorah, they also do not count towards the days of his Nazirus. Again, the Braisa is in the middle of learning out that the days when a Nazir is a confirmed mitzorah, or he's in the Yemei Sifro, that those days do not count towards the days of his Nazirus. And the Braisa continues, Yachol af yemei hasgero. I might think that's even true in the days when a Nazir is quarantined as a mitzorah. Rashi explains Yemei hasgero, Elo yamim shu muskor kodem shemuchlet. This refers to the days when he is muskor, he's quarantined before he becomes a confirmed mitzorah. Pa'amim yodalid yom v'nitar b'sochi mehesker, sometimes 14 days, and then he becomes pure. He can become pure during the days when he's quarantined. Shein olin lo osan hayamim. We want to say that those days do count towards the Nazirus. The girsa of the Rivon in Rashi is kodem shechuchlet pa'amim shiva yamim, pa'amim yodalid yom. It means sometimes 7 days, sometimes 14 days. V'nitar mitoch hesker, he can become pure. And he can become pure during those days of quarantine. Osan yamim kodem shenechlat, and during those days before he's actually a confirmed mitzorah. Kidim efar shikroi. That's all explained in the psukim. In any case, the point is, what about those days? I might have thought yachol af yemei haskerokein. I might have thought even the days when the Nazir is quarantined as mitzorah, those days should also not count towards the days of his nazirus. V'hadin nosen, you might have learned as follows: cholot metame mishkav u'moshav. A confirmed mitzorah, there's tumas mishkav and moshav. That's the tumah of lying down or sitting down. V'yemei haskero metame mishkav u'moshav, and also the days of quarantine, there's tumas mishkav and moshav. Im lamadet limei chiluto shein olin lo min haminyan. If we've learned out that during the days he's a confirmed mitzorah, it doesn't count towards his days of nazirus. Af yemei haskero ein olin lo min haminyan. Maybe we should say the same thing about the days when he's a quarantine mitzorah. Amrit lo amrit b'mei chiluto shekein chiluto ton teglachas u'maybe carbon. We say that's not true, because by the days when he's a confirmed mitzorah, there's a requirement of shaving, there's a requirement of carbon. Lefikach ein olin. That's why those days don't count towards the nazirus. Tomar b'mei haskero. Whereas when it comes to the days of quarantine, she'ein ton teglachas ve'eino mevi carbon. There's no requirement of shaving. There's no requirement of carbon. Lefikach yalu l'minyan. Therefore, those days do in fact count towards the days of the nazirus. And therefore, the Braisa concludes, Mikan Amru, from here we say, Yemei Sifro v'Yemei Gemara, the days of his counting, meaning again, that's the days where he's counting between the two shavings, and the days also when he is concluding, the days when he is a confirmed mitzorah, Ein Olin Lo Min Haminyan, those do not count towards the number of days of his nazirus. Aval Yemei Hazav v'Hazava, but however, the days where he's a zav, the nazir's a zav, let's say, or a zava, v'Hesgeru Shel Mitzorah, or the days of quarantine of a mitzorah, Harei Elu Olin Lo, those days do count towards the days of the nazirus. And the whole point of bringing this Braisa is to ask a question on Rav Chisda, because again, Rav Chisda said that during the time that a Nazir is a confirmed mitzorah, those days really do count towards the Nazirus. It's just a technical requirement that you need 30 days of hair growth. So if it's a small amount, if it's a small Nazirus of just 30 days, and then he becomes a confirmed mitzorah and has to shave, so he's going to need another 30 days, because again, he's going to need 30 days of hair growth. But this Braisa seems to indicate against Rav Chisda, because Katani Mihas, because what does it say in this Braisa? It says, Lo im amrit b'mei tuma shekein mevatel behenes hakod. It says that during the days when a Nazir is tameh, so it totally nullifies the earlier count, he has to start over. Tomar b'mei chiluto, but when it comes to the days of confirmed mitzorah, it doesn't nullify the earlier count. Now, if it's not nullifying the earlier count, it must be talking about a long Nazirus. Can't be talking about a small Nazirus, because by a small Nazirus of just 30 days, it would nullify the earlier count, because you need to have 30 days of hair growth. But what is the Braisa talking about? Ilema ben Nazirus muetes. If we're talking about a small Nazirus, Haba'inon Gidol Sar, it would nullify everything earlier, because you need 30 days of hair growth. Elalab ben Nazirus Meruba, obviously we're talking about a long Nazirus, let's say it's a year-long Nazirus, so then he needs 30 days of hair growth. He doesn't need a whole year, so therefore that's why it doesn't undo the earlier count. V'katani, but still it says, even by this Nazirus Meruba, Shein Olin Lo Min Haminyan, that those days of confirmed mitzorah don't count towards the days of Nazirus, and you see even in a long Nazirus, they don't count towards the days of Nazirus. Alma Lo Salkinla, you see that those days do not count towards the Nazirus. Shema Mina, indeed, you see from this Braisa as well, against the position of Rav Chisda. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Amar Rabbi Eliezer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer says, in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, Kol tumah min hameis, any tumah from a dead body, Nazir megaleh chaleh, which that kind of tumah would cause that a Nazir has to shave regarding that tumah. So that kind of tumas meis chayavin oleh al bias mikdash. The person would also be chayav if he becomes tamei meis in that fashion if he enters the Beis HaMikdash. However, as we saw before, there are some kinds of tumas meis where the Nazir can become tamei meis. There is tumah, but the Nazir doesn't have to shave. So v'chol tumah min hameis she'eina Nazir megaleh chaleh. If you have a tumah from a dead body that the Nazir does not have to shave for, ein chayavin oleh al bias mikdash. So such tumah, a person is not chayiv if he enters the Beis HaMikdash with such tumah. But Rabbi Meir disagrees. Rabbi Meir says, Lo teizu kala min hasheretz. This kind of tumas meis should not be less than tumas sheretz. A person is chayiv for bias mikdash if he becomes tamei from a sheretz, and therefore for these kinds of tumas meis as well, even though there's no shaving for a nazir, still there would be a chiyuv for bias mikdash. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer mishum Rabbi Yoshua gamarla. Is it really true that Rabbi Eliezer learned this from Rabbi Yoshua? It says in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer says mishum Rabbi Yoshua. Is that really true that it's from Rabbi Yoshua? Mishum Rabbi Yoshua bar memel gamarla. Isn't it really from Rabbi Yoshua bar memel? The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Eliezer says, Keshalachti l'Ardaskia, when I went to Ardaskia, Matzasi es Rabbi Yoshua ben Peser Rosh Yoshe V'don lifnei Rabbi Meir. I found that Rabbi Yoshua ben Peser Rosh, he was sitting and he was learning or judging in front of Rabbi Meir b'halacha, in terms of halacha, and he said the following: Kol tumah min hameis she'hanazir megaleh choleha. The halacha we had in our Mishnah, any tumah from a dead body that the nazir has to shave, on that kind of tumah, chayavin oleh mishum bias mikdash. On that kind of tumah, there's a chiyav in terms of bias mikdash. V'chol tumah min hameis she'eina nazir megaleh choleha. And any kind of tumah from a dead body that the nazir doesn't shave on, ein chayavin oleh mishum bias mikdash. So such tumah, there is no chiyav in terms of bias mikdash. This is what Rabbi Yoshua ben Peser Rosh was saying in front of Rabbi Meir. So Amar Lo, so he said to him, Rabbi Meir responded, Al tehezu kala misheretz. This kind of tumah you're talking about should be no worse than tumas sheretz, and there is a chiyav by bias mikdash, and therefore there should be a by sheretz, and therefore there should be a chiyav on bias mikdash for this kind of tumas meis as well. Amarti Lo, so I said back to him, Kluma tabaki, but Rabbi Yoshua bar memel. Do you know who Rabbi Yoshua bar memel is? Amar Li, so he said to me, hey, yes, I'm aware of the stature of Rabbi Yoshua bar memel. So Kach Amar Li, Rabbi Yoshua bar memel mishum Rabbi Yoshua. So he said, no, this is what Rabbi Yoshua bar memel said to me in the name of Rabbi Yoshua. Kol tumah min hameis she'hanazir megaleh choleh chayav oleh mishum bias mikdash. Any kind of tumah from a dead body that the nazir shaves on, there's a chiyuv for bias mikdash. V'chol tumah min hameis she'eina nazir megaleh choleh. And if you have tumas meis that the nazir does not shave on, ein chayavin oleh mishum bias mikdash. So for that again, there is no chiyuv in terms of bias mikdash. And so the Gemara says, Have mishum Rabbi Yoshua bar memel gamarla. Don't you see from this brisa that he's learning it not from Rabbi Yoshua, but rather from Rabbi Yoshua bar memel? And so the Gemara continues, you are correct that from this brisa it is clear that Rabbi Eliezer learned it from Rabbi Yoshua bar memel and not from Rabbi Yoshua. But Amru, they said as follows: Shma mina, you see from this whole incident, Kol shmaitza de misamru b'veit tlos. Anytime you have a situation of a teaching that went through three people, so kadmayu v'asroya amrinan. So we mentioned the first person who had the teaching and the last person who had the teaching. Meaning in this situation, Rabbi Eliezer actually learned it from Rabbi Yoshua bar memel, but Rabbi Yoshua bar memel learned it from Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua was actually the first one, and Rabbi Eliezer was the last one. And so therefore, in such a situation, Kadmoyu Vasrei Amrinan will mention in the Mishnah the first person to say the halacha and the last person to say the halacha. And Mitziyoi Lo Amrinan, we're not going to mention the middle person. That's why Rabbi Yoshua bar memel, who was in the middle of that transmission of halacha, he is left out of our Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Afanon nami tanina. We learn the same thing in the following Mishnah. And this is from a Mishnah in Peah. Amar Nochem Halav Lor Nochem, the scribe, said as follows: Kach mekubelani mi Rabbi Miyasha shekibel me'abba shekibel min hazugos. So I have a tradition from Rabbi Miyasha, who got it from father, who got it from the zugos. Shekiblu min hanavim, who got it from the prophets. Again, the zugos refers to the pairs of Tanoim that are listed in Meseches Avos, and they got it from the Neviim. Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. The following halacha l'Moshe miSinai: Bezoreya sheves v'chardol b'shnayim u'shlosha mekomos. If a person plants dill and mustard in 2 or 3 places, shenosen peya mikol echad v'echad, that the person gives peya from each one. V'ilo Yoshua v'cholev. Now again, in this list, we don't mention the people in the middle who would be Yoshua and Kalev, whereas Yoshua and Kalev loka chashav are not counted. So you see that those in the middle of the transmission of the halacha are not counted in the Mishnah. Shma mina, and the Gemara says, indeed, you see from this that is the case. And Rashi says, Hachi Garsinan Hazorea es Sadeo. Rashi has a different girsa. The mission is, if he plants his field, Shnei Minei Chitin, 2 kinds of wheat. In my son Goren Achas, Osen Pei Achas, if he makes it 1 pile, 1 Goren, so then he gives 1 pei, the whole of it, Sada Achas Zara, and since it was in 1 field, Afal Bishay Shnei Minim, even though it's 2 kinds of wheat, whole Shnei Min Chitin, since there are 2 kinds of wheat, Eino Chayev Ele Pei Achas, so it's all coming from wheat, so it's 1 pei. Elim Kain, some Daito, Lechalkan Velasos, Man Shtei Granos, unless he wants to separate them specifically into 2 granos, into two granaries, 2 piles, so then it's going to be 2 chiyuvim of peya. V'isvarim d'chsibahu azreis sheves v'chardel. The Rashi notes some have our girsa that the girsa is planting sheves and chardel. V'su lo v'anon lo garsina lo. But Rashi says that is not our girsa. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Danti lefnei Rabbi Eliezer. I taught before Rabbi Eliezer the following: Ma'im etzem kisaor. If it's true by a bone the size of a barley, she'enu metame adam ba'oel, which doesn't create tumas oil, as we've said earlier, hanazir megaleach al magovi al maso, and a nazir shaves on the touching and the carrying of an etzem kisaora. So revi'as dam. So when it comes to a quarter lug of blood, shu metame adam ba'oel, which is able to make a person tame with tumas oil, eino din shia nazir megaleach al magovi al maso. Says Rabbi Akiva, isn't it true that a nazir should have to shave for touching or carrying a revi'as halug, a quarter of a lug of blood? Rashi explains, Revi'as dam shimetame odin shanazir megaleach al magovi al masa. Rashi points out, V'hu adin dahav lememer alohilos. The truth is that Rabbi Akiva actually holds, when it comes to a Revi'as dam, that even for tumas oel, not just for touching and carrying, but even for tumas oel, the nazir shaves. Till Rabbi Akiva islei haisvar. That happens to be Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Elamishum delagabe saor de kamaisi leimine kal v'chomer. Since he's learning a kal v'chomer from saor, he's trying to prove his point from the case of the barley. That only goes so far. So lo matzi yomer, he's not able to say al ahilos, he's not able to say on the tumas oel, lo amar nami gabi revi'as dam. He can't say tumas oel in the case of the etzem kisaora, because the etzem kisaora is not mitami ba'oel, so therefore he doesn't want to go further than that which he is learning from. But really Rabbi Akiva holds that when it comes to a revi'as dam, even the tumas oel of a revi'as dam, it should be true again, sheyeh hanazir megaleach, that the nazir should shave. But in any case, Rabbi Akiva is arguing now in front of Rabbi Eliezer and saying, isn't it true that the nazir should be megaleach al magovi al masa, and at least on touching and carrying when it comes to a revi'as dam, when it comes to a quarter lug of blood? Amar li, so Rabbi Eliezer said back to me, Mazeh Akiva, what kind of limud are you making? How can you make a kal v'chomer to learn out such a halacha? Ein donin kan mi kal v'chomer. You can't learn out using a kal v'chomer in this situation. And when I came and I said over these matters before Rabbi Yoshua, Amar li, he said to me, Yafa Amrit, what you said is actually correct. Elakain amro halacha, but the reason why, meaning to say what you said in theory, really was a good kal v'chomer, Rabbi Akiva. However, there's a halacha l'moshe misinai involved over here, and therefore a kal v'chomer cannot be used. The Gemara will discuss what exactly Rabbi Yoshua is saying, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph.